Over the years of doing this, whatever this is, I haven't really been shy about my thoughts on hand grinders, and the fact that they really aren't my thing. But the Varia EVO brings something new, or at least somewhat unique, to the hand grinder market, and as new and unique things often do, it piqued my interest. And that's because the EVO itself is marketed as a hybrid design, allowing you to grind coffee either using a traditional hand crank or a detachable, rechargeable motorized unit. And inside its sleek aluminum alloy casing, it carries a capable set of 38mm stainless conical burrs, 140 stepped adjustments, and some smart, user-forward features. So, as you likely already guessed, today we're getting into the Varia EVO and we're talking about its features, its performance and usabilities, and of course the ever-present quirks and downsides. But first, in a spirit of full disclosure, the folks over at Varia sent me the EVO grinder for review, and as always, agreed to my terms of no access to my draft or the content of this video prior to full public release. Both all that out of the way, we're going to dive right into it after a quick word from this video's sponsor, Standart Magazine. If you're into coffee, its culture, and learning about the world around it, Standart Magazine is the perfect addition to your brew bar or coffee table. With quarterly releases, they shed light on issues both inside and outside of the cafe, highlighting people who elevate the industry, and deep dives into new ideas around all things coffee. To sweeten the deal, each issue also includes a sample of coffee from some of the world's best roasters, to give you the full sensory experience. You really can't beat the combination of fresh coffee and fresh print. So head on over to standartmag.com/Sprometheus, use the link in the description or code Sprometheus at checkout to snag $5 off your very own subscription of coffee and culture, shipped direct to your door nearly anywhere in the world with a money-back guarantee. And if you're still on the fence, you can actually try Standart Mag today for just the cost of shipping. There's not a whole lot to lose and a whole lot to gain. Since the EVO is a bit of a slight departure from your typical hand grinder design, a quick overview is a great way to get a bit more familiar with it before we dive a bit deeper. But to start, we should have a look at how it's packaged and arrives, because I don't know about you, but I'm a real sucker for a clean, compact, portable layout. And the EVO comes nicely nestled in this sturdy zipper-closed case. Inside, each piece of the unit is securely fastened down with its own specific spot, plus a small inner pocket for the manual and charging cable. Once the unit itself is out of the case, it has a nice smooth matte finish and heft due to its solid aluminum and stainless build, and weighs about 905 grams with the motor and 840 grams with the handle. And of course, using each setup is as simple as the press of a button or cranking the handle. The grind adjustments themselves are stepped and have a nice tactile feel and satisfying click. Plus, they're done externally, using the magnetic dosing cup that's designed with a pair of different sized teeth, which ensure you're keeping your setting in line. And the dosing cup itself is also smartly designed with tapered walls inside that make pouring it out effortless, and it also fits a standard portafilter, allowing for a simple workflow. When you're ready to get inside the grinder, there is an included Allen key that just removes the one single set screw holding the center burr into the drive shaft. And the burrs themselves, as I mentioned earlier, are a set of 38mm conicals that use Varia's in-house design Hypernova technology. And if that sounds familiar, no, you're not going crazy. They use the exact same technology, design, and size of burrs in their countertop grinder, the VS3, which, when I reviewed a while back, actually performed pretty well. But that's what I call a perfect segue into the next section. Alright, so now that we're more familiar with the EVO, its parts, and its features, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. And as you maybe guessed, the workflow of the EVO is essentially the same, or at least very similar to, any other hand grinder, especially if you're using it as a hand grinder. And the overall function in that arrangement is nice. The handle is comfortable, the bearings are smooth, and overall it works just as you'd expect. But because I think using it with the motor is more interesting and likely the main selling point for the EVO, from this point forward I'll be focusing more on the performance and functionality of that aspect. But regardless of the power plant you use to grind your coffee, you'll need to remove the top, which for the motor is threaded. Pour in your dose, which for this grinder tops out between 30 and 35 grams, set your grind size, and you're off to the races. From there, of course, the grind time itself will vary based on your size setting. Considering the unit spins at only 80 RPM, Espresso can take up to 80 seconds for 18 grams, which roughly comes out to 1/4 gram a second, and filter coffee max out at about 1/2 gram on the coarsest setting. And as you likely and correctly would expect, the battery will drain faster the finer you grind. In my experience, after a full charge, I noted about 5 batches in on average, it would drop the charge to about 75%. And once the battery dropped below 50%, the over-torque protection began kicking in halfway through batches, with left me assuming I had lost quite a bit of power. And the protection can only be reset by plugging it into a charger for 30 seconds, which of course can really extend your grind time. On the bright side though, it does have little to no retention, with most batches I put through with or without RDT resulted in throughputs at or less than 0.1 grams of the original dose. But speaking of grinds, let's get into what happens when they meet water. When it comes to espresso, because of the conical burrs, which by nature do more crushing than cutting, and create a wider grind size distribution than flat burrs, the shots themselves are very textural and balanced, and really elevate those broader, more crowd-pleasing notes in your coffee, like chocolate, caramelized sugars, and nuts, but also allowing a little tickle of citrus and other fruits to come through as well. And even out of the box, I was hitting extraction yields well into the ideal specialty coffee range, between 18 and 22%. But it should be said that the range for grinding espresso is actually pretty small. Of the 140 notches on the grinder, and considering they don't want you to use 0 through 4, there are maybe 4 to 6 settings that work well for espresso, depending on the beans and dose, leaving the other 130 or so for other forms of filter coffee. Which in terms of filter quality, the same general things can also be said, which again is more textural and balanced, but also it can produce a bit more nuance and clarity by simply the nature of it being not as condensed as the espresso. I think the obvious place to start here is with the motor, because most of the quirks and downsides are more or less related to that one specific area. So for one, I have concerns about the lifespan of its battery, because as we all know, rechargeable batteries can get less and less effective over time, and they're relatively sensitive. And trying to make sure that your battery is staying between the manual stated 20 to 80% for optional longevity is kind of a lot to ask an end user. And even beyond that, the EVO comes with more motor limitations, like limiting grind times below 140 seconds in a single cycle, allowing 90 seconds of rest between cycles, and not operating for more than 6 minutes in a 30-minute period. And even though I think in most standard use cases these limits aren't a problem, but these warnings do sort of drive home the point that maybe battery-powered grinding still has some ways to go. And another interesting tidbit also in the manual is this warning, which says, don't use grind settings lower than 4, which causes burrs to touch and wear faster. But based on my testing, the burrs don't touch at all on any setting. Even at 0, the handle feels like it's moving unimpeded. Yet even if that was an issue, the question would be, why are they even there and marked as grind settings you can use? Why not just move the 0 setting 4 notches coarser? It just seems kind of like an odd oversight. And lastly, the motor has an odd habit of over-tightening itself onto the grinder. You can actually see it tightening itself when the power is engaged. And it can definitely make the motor head difficult to remove and require a bit more muscle than feels reasonable. In the end, generally I would say I think the Varia EVO is a fun piece of coffee gear. It's compact, it's attractive, and at $240, it's not incredibly expensive considering its capabilities. But I do think Varia would be better off describing it as modular rather than hybrid, because a true hybrid, at least in theory, would be able to use the motor and the handle in tandem. It would essentially act as an assist, which would come in pretty handy, especially for grinding finer. But of course, it's also not without its issues, and I don't really see a lot of home baristas adopting the Varia EVO as a primary grinder, especially if you're heavily into espresso. But as a secondary travel grinder, which really seems to be its angle, I think it'll get you where you want to be, considering it does a wide variety of brew methods and has a backup handle if the battery runs out, or when it inevitably doesn't take a charge or fails completely, as rechargeables eventually do. But on that note, I think it's time I start wrapping this one up, and as always, pass the conversation on to you. So what are your thoughts on the Varia EVO? And also, what are your thoughts on battery-operated coffee grinders? Are you a yay or a nay? Drop your answers to those questions and any others you may have in the comment section down below. And as always, I'll see y'all next week. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that little bell button for notifications of new videos posted every Friday. Check out my Instagram at Sprometheus for content throughout the week. Help support the channel by considering becoming a member for early content access. And as always, stay caffeinated. Ponyboy.